So my topic today is real algebraic geometry and computations, but I'm going to start by telling you a few words about what I am doing related to women in mathematics in various organizations. Okay, so that's what I want to discuss. Some quick presentation of some activities for women in mathematics, then real root counting and generalization, quantifier elimination, then complexity. Okay, so let me start with the first topic. So as Leila just said, I'm part of this International Mathematical Union Committee for Women in Mathematics. And here is the information about our website. So this committee is chaired by me, and there are 10 members, 8 women and 2 men worldwide. And we have several activities. I don't want to list them in details, but you can find them here. And I want to mention that in Africa, we are particularly a partner of the African Women in Mathematics Association, which is quite active. And you can find also the website of this African Women in Math.org. So maybe I should mention that we have the call for activities in 2021, which is open till December 15. So you can find it on our website. If you want to organize some activity for women in mathematics, you can, in 2021, maybe a virtual one because of the COVID crisis, then you can apply and try to get a grant from us. Okay, one other project I was involved in is the Gender Gap in Science project. And we have a book which is reporting on this project. So you can find, again, the website of the project and the website where you can find the book that you can download for free. And in fact, what was this project? So we call it a Gender Gap in Science project, but in fact, its full name was a global approach to the gender gap in mathematical computing and natural sciences, how to measure it, how to reduce it. So we get funding from the International Science Council during 3 years, from 2017 to 2019. And we were together 11 organizations, and the leading organization was IMU, co-leading with this International Union for Pure and Applied Chemistry, and I was one of the 2 coordinators of the project. So we've been doing several things that you can find also in details in our website or in the report. Now, one third thing I want to mention is the Standing Committee for Gender Equality in Science. And again, we have a very recent website that you can find following this link. And what is this Standing Committee for Gender Equality in Science? In fact, it's an initiative of 9 international unions, including the International Mathematical Union. And my role in this committee is to be the IMU representative and also the communication officer in charge of helping to have the website. And it's an organization which is creating a permanent committee for gender equality. And we have also several things we are doing. And again, I don't want to read them into details, but again, you can follow the link and go to our website and see what we are doing. Okay. So that's it. That's the part I wanted to tell you about my activities related to women in mathematics. Now we go to the mathematical content, which is real root counting and generalization that I'm going to explain now. Okay, so maybe, okay, I want to stop to see if someone has a question on the first part. Okay, so if you don't have a question now, then I'll go on and we can, of course, discuss at the end of the lecture. Okay, so let's go to real root counting and generalizations. So what is the real root counting problem? So it's a very basic algorithmic problem, is to be able to compute how many roots for real polynomial, how many real roots for a real polynomial. So it's a very basic problem. And by real here, I mean something slightly maybe different from what you are used to, which is, I mean, with coefficients in a real closed field, R. And in this case, the algebraic closure is R of I, which I call C. And what do we mean by a real closed field? So it's a totally ordered field. with the extra intermediate value theorem property for polynomials. So it means that if we have a polynomial and its sign is changing between two numbers, since we have an ordered field, we can compare these numbers, and there is always a root in the open segment between them. So these two properties are some algebraic approach to what it means to be a real field. And in order to do this real root counting, there were various techniques that were developed through history. So one very old one is Descartes' law of sign. The second one is the Sturm theorem, which is using the Euclidean division of the polynomial and its derivative. And the one I want to focus on today is the Hermite method, which is using the signature of a quadratic form with entries the Newton sums, which I'm going to explain now in details. So if you're interested to know about these three methods and more, then you can read my book authored with Shergata Basu and Richard Pollack, and called Algorithms in Real Algebraic Geometry. And in fact, you can find the link of on my webpage so that you can download the book, and you don't need to buy it if you don't have enough dollars to buy it. And it's a new edition, which is online on my webpage. Okay, so let's go and define Hermite's quadratic form. So I have my univariate polynomial P, and I look at its zeros inside C. C, if you remember, it was the algebraically closed field containing R. And I define the ith Newton sum as the sum of mu of x to the I for all possible x, where mu of x is the multiplicity of x as the root of P. And then I construct a very specific symmetric matrix by putting on the anti-diagonals these Newton sums. So the zeroth Newton sum, so the zeroth Newton sum is going to be the sum of mu of x to the 0, which is just the degree of the polynomial. Then the first Newton sum, which is just going to be the sum weighted with multiplicities of the roots. Then the sum of the squares of the roots weighted with multiplicities, and so on, up to n to the 2p minus 2, where p was the degree of the polynomial p. So it is a p times p matrix. And the Hermite quadratic form is the form associated to this symmetric matrix. Okay, so in order to maybe to follow better the construction, we are going to take an example. And this example is a very basic example of a second degree polynomial. So I suppose that a is not 0, so it's of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. But of course, we suppose that a is not 0, so it's really a polynomial of degree 2. Then it has also two roots. These roots can be either complex or real. We are going to discuss that, but in any case, I call them x1 and x2. Maybe also it's a multiple root, in this case, x1 equals x2. So I want to compute the Newton sum that I want to put in this Newton matrix. So I need here n0, n1, and n2, because the degree p is equal to 2. So if you see here, the degree p is equal to 2, then 2p minus 2 is 2. So in this case, it's just this very simple matrix. So I need to know what is n0, n1, and n2. So n0 is x1 to the power 0 plus x2 to the power 0. So any number to the power 0 is 1. So this is just 2. This is the degree of the polynomial. Now x1 plus x2, if I identify in this equation both parts, I see that x1 plus x2 is minus b divided by a, by looking at the coefficient for the polynomial of degree 1. And of course c, as you know also, C over A is x1, x2 when we identify, and we are going to use that now. Okay, so now I want to compute n2. n2 I can compute by saying that, of course, it is x1 squared plus x2 squared, but I can write it as x1 plus x2 squared minus 2 x1, x2. Why? Because I know already x1 plus x2, which is minus b over a, and x1, x2, which is, as I said before, c over a. So I write it, is b squared divided by a squared minus 2 times c over a, This is b square minus 2ac divided by a square, and this is my Newton matrix. Okay? By taking 2 minus b over a, b square minus 2ac divided by a square. And you notice that when I look at its determinant, it's just going to be the usual discriminant divided by a square. So here I should write with delta the discriminant. So b square minus 4ac, the usual one. So you see, how do you get that? Well, you see, you have 2b square minus 4ac, but then you remove another b square, and finally you get b square minus 4ac divided by a square. So what do I mean by the Hermite quadratic form associated to this Newton matrix? Well, how do I get an Hermite quadratic, the quadratic form from the symmetric matrix? I introduce two variables, t0 and t1, and I put n0 t0 square, n1 t0 t1, and another n1 t0 t1, and then n2 t1 square. And that's how we get a quadratic form from the symmetric matrix. So if I replace the values, I get 2 t0 square minus 2 b over a t0 t1 plus b square minus 2ac divided by a square t1 square, and this is my Hermite quadratic form. Okay, so far I've just been introducing the Hermite quadratic form, and now I'm going to tell you how it is useful for real root counting. Okay, for this we need to remember what is the signature of a quadratic form. So the signature of a quadratic form is the difference in the number of positive coefficients and negative coefficients when you decompose the quadratic form in square of linear factors over R. Okay, so let's see how we do it in this special case. So I just repeated the computation we did of the Hermite quadratic form, and you see that here I can use this in order to introduce a square, and then there is a part which is missing, which is this. Okay. So you see, if I put the two into factor, this looks like the beginning of t0 minus b divided by 2a t1 square. And then there is something which remains, and when we compute it, we see that it's just delta divided by 2a square times t1 square. So we did decompose the quadratic form into two linear factors, two square of linear factors with coefficients. And these coefficients can be either positive or negative depending on the sign. Okay. So in case delta here is positive, it means we have two squares in this sum, two squares with positive coefficients. The signature is 2. When delta equals 0, then we don't have this part, we just have one square. So the signature is equal to 1. And when delta is negative, we have one square which has a positive coefficient, the other square which has a negative coefficient. So finally, the signature is 0. Okay, but there is also another way to compute the signature of this quadratic form, which is to take into account the roots, which I had called x1 and x2 of the polynomial. Because if you see here what was n0, n0 was n0 was 2, okay, and then n1 was x0 plus x1, and then n2 was x1 square plus x2 square. So if I put all this together, I see that this Hermite quadratic form was only, in fact, the sum of two parts, which are t0 plus x1 t1 square plus t0 plus x2 t1 square. And what happens? So if x1 and x2 are real, then this is already the decomposition I'm looking for, and the signature is 2. If x1 is equal to x2, which means that x1 is of multiplicity 2, then I get only one square. So I get signature 1. And when x1 and x2 are some complex conjugate numbers, complex roots but which are necessarily conjugate, then I can express them as d plus ie and d minus ie. And when I make this little computation, I see a difference of two squares. So I've forgotten here some parentheses. And this difference of two squares gives me signature 0. Of course, why is it true that all this discussion is possible? Because we know that the signature is an invariant by Sylvester inertial law. So this signature will not change whatever is the way we are decomposing the same quadratic form in various sums or differences of squares of linear forms. So it means here we have been using two different decompositions in square of linear factors, and we see that the signature of the Hermite quadratic form is equal to the number of real roots, which is 2 when delta is strictly positive, that was the case of 2 real roots, 1 if delta equals 0, that was the case of 1 real root, and 0 if delta is negative, which was the case of 0 real roots. So based on the signature of the quadratic form, we know that to have 2 real roots of delta positive is the same, 1 real root and delta equals 0 is the same, and 0 real root and delta negative is the same. And finally, this is of course very easy example of a polynomial of degree 2, but what is true is something very general, that the signature of the Hermite quadratic form is always exactly the number of real roots of the polynomial. Not only for polynomials of degree 2, but for polynomials of any degree. So the main question now is, how do we compute these Newton sums? How do we compute the Hermite matrix? Because we don't know the roots. In fact, we want to know something about the roots, like how many real roots there are, without computing them. And how can that be done? I mean, these Ni are related by the so-called Newton-Gérard formula to the coefficients of the polynomial. There are some linear relationships between the AI. So if we know already the coefficients of the polynomial, then we are going to be able to compute the Newton sums. So remember here, I was computing N2 in a very ad hoc method directly. But in general, I can always compute N2, N3, N4, and so on by using this Newton-Gérard formula. Okay, so you see here, if you start, for example, with a polynomial with, say, integer coefficients, then the Ni are going to be rational numbers. Or if you start, as I did, with polynomial with parameters ABC, then the Ni are going to be some expressions, rational expressions in the coefficient, just as here we were getting, some rational expressions, some quotients of two polynomials expressions in the parameters ABC, and this is because of this Newton-Gérard formula. Okay, so how do we prove this theorem saying that the signature of the quadratic form is the number of real roots? But in fact, it's very simple, similar to what we were already doing in the special case, because in the special case, we've seen that when we have complex conjugate roots, they were contributing for a difference of two squares, and this is going to be true in general. So that's the way to prove that the signature of the quadratic form is the number of real roots. And more important for us, it's also that this signature of the quadratic form is in fact determined by the sign of the principal minors of the Newton matrix Newton of P. So you see here, I told you, so what are the principal minors? It is this first minor, which is 2, which is always positive. And then the second minor, we had computed already, it is delta divided by a square. And the sign of delta divided by a square is the same as the sign of delta. And we had seen that this sign of delta was deciding the number of real roots. So it is going to be something general here, of course more complicated to prove, that in order to know the number of real roots, we just have to compute all the principal minors of this Newton of this matrix Newton of P. And how do we compute Newton of P? By using the Newton-Gérard formula in order to get the Newton sums out of the coefficients of P. Okay, so again, maybe I should stop 1 second to see if everybody is following. So first, Leila, are you hearing me fine? And
yes, we are
is it okay?
Yeah, you can.
It's okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and no one is asking. Okay,
It's
no
very
one
clear
is
as a
wanting to
moment.
ask a question.
It's very clear. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
You
Thank you.
continue.
Okay, okay. So in fact, I said I'm not only interested in real root counting, but in some generalization. So this generalization is what we call the Tarski query. So the Tarski query, for this we need two polynomials, p as usual, and then q, and we look at the sum of the sign of q of x, for x being a real root of p. And by the sign of an element, so x is now a number, it's a root of p, then q of x, q is a univariate polynomial, so q of x is also a number. We can look at its sign, and its sign is going to be 1 if q of x is positive, 0 if q of x is negative, and -1 if q of x is negative. So, sorry, 1 if q of x is positive, 0 if q of x is 0, and -1 if q of x is negative. And you notice also that when q equals 1, then 1 of x is equal to 1, sine of 1 of x is always sine of 1, which is 1. Then it's just the number of real roots. So this quantity, the Tarski query, is a generalization of the number of real roots, and we recover the number of real roots when we take q equals 1. And we would like to compute these quantities, and we are going to see why later. But what I want to say that we can compute these Tarski queries again using the signature of another quadratic form, which I call generalized Hermite quadratic form. And in fact, its entries are going to be linear combinations of the Newton sums. So if we know how to compute the Newton sums, it will be easy to compute the entries of the generalized Hermite quadratic form using the coefficients also of the polynomial q. So how do we do that? Okay, so we define now the Newton sum of p and q, if you want some ni of pq. And how is it defined? When q equals 1, it will just be the usual notion of Newton sum, but when q is not equal to 1, when q is equal to, when q is another polynomial, is defined as sum of mu of x, q of x to the I. And you see that if you decompose q of x in sum of monomials, you are going to get some linear combination of some Newton sums with coefficients which are the coefficients of q. So knowing the coefficients of q and knowing the Newton sum, you can very easily compute this ni of pq. And now I make the ijth coefficient of the matrix Newton of pq as being equal to n I plus g minus 2 of pq. So it's again a p matrix, where p is the degree of p. But rather than putting as entries the Newton sum that we had here, I put as entries now the ni of pq. So it's a little heavy notation. This is why I just propose to just look at what is the typical element inside this matrix is ni plus g minus 2 of pq. And Hermite of pq is the associated form to this symmetric matrix. And we have a similar result, which is that the signature of the generalized Hermite quadratic form is the Tarski query of p and q, which means that I recover, when I take q equals 1, I just recover the notion of number of real roots I had before. And how do I prove this generalized Hermite theory? Well, again, by looking at complex conjugate roots, again, they are going to contribute to a difference of two squares. And again, I have a matrix, and the signature is determined by the sign of the principal minors of Newton of pq. So it's really, this generalization really works the same, it's just a little more technical. So why is it important for us to compute the Tarski query? Because in fact, we are interested in, for example, when we deal with one polynomial, we are interested in three quantities. How many roots of p do we have where q is positive? How many roots of p do we have where q is negative? How many roots of p do we have where q equals 0? So we are interested in computing these three quantities, And it turns out that it's not difficult to see that we can, in fact, compute it using 3 Tarski queries. So you have 3 unknowns, and if we know these 3 quantities here, we're going to be able to compute that. So it is just the Tarski query of P and 1, which is the number of roots, the Tarski query of P and Q, which is the number of roots of P where Q is positive minus the number of roots of P where Q is negative, and the Tarski query of P and Q square, which is the number of roots of P where Q is not 0. If we have these 3 quantities, we are able to compute these 3 quantities here. And more generally, we can do what we call sign determination. So if we have one polynomial and a list of other polynomials, using Tarski queries of all possible products of the Q and the Qi square, we are going to be able to compute what are at the roots of P, the possible signs of a list of polynomials. So that's what we call sign determination. So this Tarski query, based on this signature of a generalized Hermite quadratic form, is a very powerful tool in order to compute number of roots with given sign conditions for one polynomial or for a list of polynomials, making only computations which are based on some linear computation, some linear combination of the Newton sums together with computing determinants. So very basic computation that we can perform without looking at the numerical value of the roots. Okay, so again, maybe I should stop for 1 second for you to digest this slide here. So the main idea that this Tarski query will give us the way to compute not only the number of real roots, but the number of real roots for which other polynomials take given sign conditions. Okay. So an important consequence for us is the way we can deal with real algebraic numbers. So what is a real algebraic number? It will be a real root of a polynomial, say with integer coefficients. And we are saying that the real roots of a polynomial are always characterized by sign conditions. In fact, they are characterized by the signs which are taken by the derivatives of the polynomial at the root. And that's what we call Stom's encoding. And how do we prove that? Well, we do it by induction on the degree of the polynomial. The statement is obviously true for the polynomial of degree 1, and we have to prove that if the statement is true for the derivative, then it's going to be true for the polynomial itself. So it means we can characterize real algebraic numbers by some sign conditions, and we don't need any information on the numerical value of the number. For example, square root of 2. Of course, we know that it is 1.4. But in fact, for us here in this context, it's just the unique root of the polynomial x squared minus 2, which is making the derivative, which is 2x positive. And minus square root of 2 is the unique root of x2 minus 2, making now 2x negative. So we can characterize them with the sign of the derivative. Of course, in this case, it's very simple. But in general, it's always true. If you take various real roots of the same polynomial, they are going to give always different sign conditions to the collection of derivatives. Which means that if we replace this list of polynomial Q1, Qs I was telling you about by the derivatives of P, we can in fact use sign determination to compute the Thom encoding of the roots of the polynomial. And in fact, what I told you about sign determination can even be improved, because I told you that we compute at the roots of P the sign of a list of polynomials using all possible squares of Qi square. But in fact, when you look into more details to sign determination, you see that you can use Tarski query of much less, only a few products of the Qi and the Qi square, and this is very important in computations. But the idea is that you have many products of Qi square. If you have S polynomials, it will be like 3 to the S possibilities for these products. But you have only a number of roots which is bounded by the degree of the polynomials. So you have much less possibilities. So if you do that carefully, you are able to improve sign determination, which is important. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say about real root counting and generalization, and we're going to see how we use that for something which is called quantifier elimination. So again, maybe I stop for a while and ask if there is something unclear I should repeat, or no?
I think we can continue.
Okay, thank you. Okay, quantifier elimination. Okay, so again, I'm taking always the same example, as you can see, which is this example from high school mathematics. And we want to know the condition for the existence of a real root such that ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. A being different from 0, which means the polynomial is really of degree 2. And we knew before, and we have also seen with this Hermite computation, that the quantity, the existence of a real root is given by b squared minus 4ac negative and a not 0. Why? Because when b squared minus 4ac was strictly positive, we had two roots. When it was equal 0, we had one root, and when it was strictly negative, we had 0 root, which means that there was no x. Okay. So you see what all this topic is called quantifier elimination, because here you have a quantifier and the variable x, and here you have no quantifier. You have eliminated the quantifier, and instead you have just same conditions on expressions depending on the parameters a, b, and c. So we can see in this in two various ways. If a, b, c are numbers, then this statement is either true or false by looking at the sign of b squared minus 4ac of delta. But and the point of this is that we are replacing something that looks like an infinite computation, where we should try every number, try every x to see if it's a root, by a finite computation, which is just compute b squared minus 4ac and check its sign. Now, if a, b, c are not parameters, then what we get is a new formula, which is, so this was a formula, this is another formula. But the characteristic of the new formula that there is no more the variable x, and what we obtain is same condition on these parameters for the statement to be true. So finally, we found how do we discuss if we take any ABC are parameters, we know for all of them simultaneously the rule, which is to compute b squared minus 4ac and a dot 0. Okay. So this is what quantifier elimination is about. Okay, so when we have an existential quantifier in front of a formula, so this formula here was just the conjunction of two pieces, but it can be more complicated. It can be any Boolean combination of sign conditions and some polynomials. Then quantifier elimination is telling us that it's always possible to eliminate the extra variable and to get sign conditions in the parameters. So that's a result due to Tarski. So Tarski was a mathematician from Poland in the end of the 30s. And what was his method? So his method that we explain in our book, it was parametric sign determination. So we wanted to compute the same condition on the parameters, which are fixing the realizable sign conditions on the list of parametric polynomials at the root of parametric polynomials. And how do we do it? We use Tarski query of P and all products of the Qi and Qi squared. And this way we do it. So this is a way to eliminate one existential quantifier. But of course, the formula may be more complicated. Maybe there are more quantifiers to this part. Then we eliminate from inside up to outside, eliminating finally all the variables. And this is based only, finally, on computing some principal minors of some generalized Hermite quadratic form associated to P and some products of the Qi and the Qi squared. Okay, now we want to give some geometric interpretation of this quantifier elimination result by defining a notion of semi-algebraic set. So a semi-algebraic set is a set which is going to be defined by a Boolean combination of inequalities and equalities. And we want to prove that the projection of a semi-algebraic set is semi-algebraic, but we notice that the projection can be described with just an existential quantifier. When I project a set from, say, Rk plus 1 to Rk, I get the points in Rk such that there exists an x such that xy is in S. And then if we eliminate this quantifier, we are going to describe the projection by, again, a Boolean combination of inequalities and equalities. So that we can see that eliminating an existential quantifier and projecting for the long one variable is the same. It means that in real algebraic geometry, we are creating this way a very strong link between logic and geometry. And we can prove also it's a very powerful tool to prove that some sets are semi-algebraic. So any set that you can describe as a projection or through a formula which you can where you can eliminate variables one after the other, all these are going to be semi-algebraic. For example, the closure of a semi-algebraic set is semi-algebraic because you can describe the closure by a formula. The interior of a semi-algebraic set is semi-algebraic because you can describe the interior by a formula. So in fact, anything that you use by that you can describe by the quantified formula and eliminate quantifiers, you get always a semi-algebraic set. So it's a very stable set collection of sets that are very, very useful in geometry. So maybe to illustrate this projection, I just take a very simple by looking at the projection of a circle. So the circle is defined in the plane as x squared plus y squared minus 1 equals 0. And I project it on the line, and you see that I project it as a segment, right? So how can I prove this? Well, I'm looking for the condition for x that there is a y such that x squared minus y plus y squared minus 1 equals 0. And this is just saying that y squared must be equal to 1 minus x squared. But y squared is positive because it's a square. So the condition is just that 1 minus x squared is positive. And this is a way to describe the minus 1 segment. So, but this is very general. If you take a semi-algebraic set, so this is an example of a semi-algebraic set in a space, here it is R2, but it could be in Rk plus 1, and you project on Rk, then you'll get the projection will be semi-algebraic. And this is just quantifier elimination, just the same statement from logic that you see now as a statement from geometry. Okay, so again, I want to ask if it's okay. People are following. There is nothing to repeat. It's clear. Leila, are you still there?
Yes, it's clear.
And I guess if no one asks, sorry?
It's clear to everyone.
Okay, so
I think it's clear. Thank you.
Okay, so let me go on. Okay, and now I turn to my last topic, which is complexity. Of course, I'm not going to be able to give many details, but I want to tell you a few things about this topic. Because we want to discuss a little bit these computations. At first, is it possible to do everything I said by an effective procedure, by computation? And then the question is also the complexity of this computation. Is it going to be extremely long, or is it something we can do on a computer, and so on? Okay. So the existence of an effective procedure is yes, because we've seen that real root counting and Tarski query by Hermite, it was possible to do the computation. And the computation was taking place in the ring or in the field, say, of coefficients generated by the coefficient of the polynomial. So it is certainly an effective procedure. And then for quantifier elimination, also it was an effective procedure. And it's funny to see that Tarski's paper was in fact supported by a company which is called RAND Corporation. So maybe you know that the RAND Xerox copy and things like that, they were doing this kind of thing, and they were interested in the effective procedure and supporting this great logician called Tarski. And so we really do all the method for doing quantifier elimination is perfectly effective. So you take the last quantified variables as the main variable, you consider the other variables as parameters, you look at the signature of many quadratic forms with entries which are polynomial in the remaining variables. This gives you a new formula, and you have one less variable, and you start again, and that's how it works. So it is an effective procedure. But now, what about the complexity of this procedure? So in fact, the first complexity bounds that you obtain when you look at this method of Tarski is what we call the primitive recursive bound for quantifier elimination. So we can express quantifier elimination in terms of parameters which are the number of variables, the degree of the polynomial, the number of polynomials, and things like that. And you want to estimate the number of arithmetic operations you have to perform in order to compute all these principal minors of the generalized Hermite quadratic forms, of many Hermite quadratic forms, and so on. For one given Hermite quadratic form, we have polynomial time, but when you do all the steps in quantifier elimination, we have something which is primitive recursive, which means that the complexity of the computation can be bounded by a tower of exponentials, but the height of the tower of exponential is going to depend on the number of variables. And together with my colleague, Daniel Perucci, we were able to find a purely algebraic elementary recursive quantifier elimination, which is based on the things I told you about, which is based on Thom encodings and sign determination. So by elementary recursive, we mean something which is much better than primitive recursive. So primitive recursive, you could have a tower which was bounded by some parameters, like the number of variables. But for elementary recursive quantifier elimination, you bound the number of exponentials by a fixed number. It still can be very big because the exponential function is very big, but it is much better. And of course, it was not the first time that we obtained our result is not the first one which is giving elementary recursive quantifier elimination. And there were other methods, a very well-known method called cylindrical algebraic decomposition by Collins. But in fact, it was important to have this purely algebraic elementary recursive quantifier elimination, and this is what we get. So in the proof of Collins, it is not purely algebraic because in order to justify that Collins method is indeed making quantifier elimination, we need some geometry, and it's not purely algebraic. But if you want to do better, this is quantifier elimination, I am here missing an N, then we can see that it's even possible to do better. This is to project blocks of variables in one step using the critical point method, rather than just eliminating one variable after the other. So that's an important idea that was introduced in this field of quantifier elimination by people called Grigoriev and Vorobyov from Russia. And this is the idea here. Oh, the idea is coming here. Okay. So what are the critical points in the x direction? So suppose that you want to, so you imagine that this is a surface, say in free space, and you could project it on the plane. This is more or less what I did with this picture. And then project it again, and this will generate a lot of points, but you can also look directly at what is called the critical point in the x direction. So what are they? They are extremal points in this direction. So if you imagine that you have a family of hyperplanes, they are going to touch here for the first time, then they will be tangent here also here, and then they will finally leave disconnected components. And for disconnected component, they also are going to enter and leave. So finally, if the set is non-empty, it means that this family, if the set is defining some smooth hypersurface, and if it's non-empty, you are going to find some points, and these points can be characterized. Being critical means that you can characterize with some algebraic entity. So if you do that, which I'm not going to explain in words now, if you are given a smooth and bounded hypersurface and you take a sweeping family of parallel hyperplanes, they are going to touch, this family is going to touch the hypersurface in a finite number of points characterized by an algebraic system of equations. And it turns out that this finite number of points is going to be single exponential. Why? Because you are going to define critical points by p equals 0 and then some derivatives of p also equal to 0. And you can use Bezout theorem in order to bound the number of roots. And then using this ID, you can do quantifier elimination. And it means you get, rather than having something which is elementary recursive, you get just single exponential complexity when you have only one block of existential quantifiers. Because all the quantifiers are there exist, and you can use this trick of critical points. So this is the main idea, but of course it's much more complicated to really prove it, but that's the main idea. And you can find details in this paper of Grigoriev, Vorobyov, or in my book with Shagata and Wiki. Okay, so before finishing my talk, I want to tell you that there are some very big open questions that we don't know how to do, because when you look at real numbers, not a real algebraic number, which is the solution of a polynomial with integer coefficients, but real numbers, it's in general impossible to decide whether a real number is 0 or to decide its sign. Because simply, of course, in many cases, you can decide the sign. Like, for example, pi, the length of a circle is going to be positive because it's bigger than 3, and 3 is positive. But it can happen that when you compute a real number, you have many 0 digits, but many 0 digits doesn't say that it's going to be 0 forever, and also doesn't say whether it's going to be positive or negative. Because maybe at the beginning you find many zeros, but at some point you are going to get something and you can decide that the number is finally positive. So in general, for real numbers, we don't know whether a polynomial like 6 squared plus t has 0, 1, or 2 real roots, because you would need to test the quantity t, and t, you don't know what is its sign. Here, in this case, you know, the discriminant is just t. Okay. Minus t, in fact. Okay. So one main open problem, which is that we would like to do real algebraic geometry of the real numbers, but we don't know how to do it because all the existing techniques that you have seen are based on size and trichotomy. Everything I was telling you was look at delta, decide is it positive, 0, negative, and so on. And this is not possible anymore. So this is a very basic problem. And right now we don't know how to do quantifier elimination over the real numbers, not only say discrete numbers. When we don't have a test to decide whether an element is 0, positive, or negative, we are in big trouble. Okay. Okay, so that's basically the end of my talk. So I just want to give you a few references. So first, as I said, to my book, but as I told you, you can also find it on my webpage, and it will be even a more recent edition. Then we had this work about Tom encoding. It's a work I did with Michel Coste. And then this system of polynomial equation by Grigoriev or Vorobyov I mentioned, and then our more recent paper by Daniel Perucci, which just appeared 3 years ago. And you can find many other references, of course, mainly in the book. That's where you can find the main references to Hermite and to all these people, and various other methods. Okay, so I wanted to thank you for your attention and just stop my talk here. Thank you.